I can feel the weight of betrayal in my chest every time I think about how my wife of 8 years cheated on me with my childhood friend. For someone who built a successful career as a software engineer and provided a comfortable life for us, both discovering their affair shattered my world. But instead of confronting them with anger, I chose calculated silence. I simply vanished from her life, while systematically ensuring she would face consequences for her actions. Before I tell you how I dismantled my cheating wife's life piece by piece, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about sweet revenge against those who betray our trust. My name is Gustav, and until recently, I was living what I thought was the American dream. I had worked my way up from humble beginnings to become a senior software engineer at one of the most prestigious tech companies in the country. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Michigan, I had always been the kid with his nose in computer books, dreaming of creating something meaningful in the digital world someday. After putting myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, I landed my dream position and quickly rose through the ranks. All that success meant nothing without someone to share it with. I had always imagined finding the perfect partner to build a life with, someone who would celebrate my victories and help me through the inevitable failures. That dream seemed to come true when I met Caitlin at my coworker Terry's housewarming party. Caitlin was standing alone by the bookshelf when I approached her. With her dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders and a smile that lit up her entire face, I was immediately drawn to her. We started talking about the collection of classic novels on the shelf, and 3 hours later we were still deep in conversation, oblivious to the party winding down around us. She was a marketing executive at a major retail company, smart, ambitious, and surprisingly funny. We discovered we both loved hiking classic films and had the same bizarre affinity for spicy food challenges. It felt like the universe had created the perfect match for me, and I was instantly smitten. Our romance progressed quickly after that night. We went on dates almost every evening for the next few weeks, each one better than the last. Within 6 months, we had moved in together, combining our book collections and arguing good-naturedly about whose couch should stay and whose should go. I remember thinking how easy it was with her, how natural it felt to build a life together. 8 months into our relationship, I knew she was the one. I planned an elaborate proposal during our vacation to Hawaii, arranging for a private dinner on the beach at sunset. When I dropped to one knee and pulled out the ring, I had spent months saving for her eyes filled with tears, and her enthusiastic yes made me the happiest man alive. We spent the rest of the evening calling our families and friends, sharing our joy, and beginning to plan our future together. Our wedding the following spring was everything we had dreamed of. 200 of our closest friends and family gathered at a charming vineyard venue to witness our vows. Caitlin was breathtaking in her white gown, and I remember my hands trembling slightly as I placed the ring on her finger. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing toasts and promises of a lifetime of happiness ahead. We followed the wedding with a 2-week honeymoon in Italy, exploring ancient ruins, eating excessive amounts of pasta, and falling even deeper in love in the romantic cities of Venice, Florence, and Rome. When we returned home, we settled into married life, with ease, creating routines and traditions that would define our relationship for years to come. The next 8 years were, at least on the surface, everything I had hoped for in a marriage. We both thrived in our careers, with promotions and raises that allowed us to purchase our dream home in an upscale neighborhood 3 years into our marriage. We filled our weekends with dinner parties, hiking trips, and visits with our growing circle of couple friends. We discussed having children and had even started planning for a family in the coming year. From the outside looking in, we were the perfect couple with the perfect life. It was during year 5 of our marriage that Jack re-entered my life. Jack had been my friend since elementary school, but we had drifted apart when he moved across the country for college. When he returned to town to open his own fitness studio, I was thrilled to reconnect. Jack had always been the athletic one between us, and his new career as a fitness instructor suited his energetic personality perfectly. I introduced Jack to Caitlin over dinner one night, and they hit it off immediately. Jack had always been charismatic, making friends everywhere he went, so I was not surprised when he and Caitlin developed their own friendship. When she mentioned she wanted to get in better shape, it seemed natural that she would train with Jack at his studio. I was happy my wife and my oldest friend got along so well, never once suspecting that their relationship would evolve beyond innocent friendship. Looking back now, there were signs I should have noticed. Caitlin started spending more and more time at the gym, often returning home later than expected, flushed and energized from her workouts. There were text messages she would quickly hide when I entered the room, claiming they were surprise birthday plans or Christmas gift ideas. I noticed a growing emotional distance between us, though our day-to-day interactions remained affectionate and seemingly happy. Occasionally, I would feel a twinge of suspicion, but I would quickly dismiss it as paranoia. After all, this was my wife and one of my oldest friends. I trusted them both completely. That trust was the foundation of our marriage, the bedrock upon which I had built my entire life. I never imagined it could crumble so quickly, or that the people I loved most would be the ones holding the sledgehammer. The business trip that changed everything was supposed to be a routine conference in Seattle. As a senior developer, I was expected to represent my company at major industry events, and this particular conference was one I attended annually. I was scheduled to be gone for 3 days, presenting our latest innovations and networking with peers in the tech world. The conference was going well until the final keynote speaker canceled due to illness. With the schedule suddenly open, I decided to catch an earlier flight home and surprise Caitlin. I texted my friend Derek from work to ask for a ride from the airport, but did not message Caitlin, wanting to see her face when I walked through the door unexpectedly. I still remember every detail of that drive home. Derek and I chatted about the conference highlights, and I mentioned picking up a bottle of Caitlin's favorite wine on the way. I was in good spirits, looking forward to an extra night at home with my wife, instead of a lonely hotel room. When Derek dropped me off, I immediately noticed an unfamiliar car in our driveway. It was a sleek black Audi one I had never seen before. Still, I did not think much of it at first, assuming Caitlin might have a friend over, or perhaps had ordered something that required delivery. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk, thanked Derek for the ride, and approached our front door, key in hand. The house was strangely quiet when I entered. No television sounds, no music, none of the usual signs of Caitlin being home with a guest. I called out her name softly but received no response. That was when I noticed a man's jacket slung over the banister, one I recognized as belonging to Jack. A sense of unease began to creep over me, but I still did not want to jump to conclusions. Perhaps they had gone for a run together and would be back soon. As I moved through the house, I heard faint sounds coming from upstairs, from the direction of our bedroom. My heart began to pound as I slowly climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The bedroom door was partially open, and what I saw through that crack destroyed my world in an instant. There, in our marital bed, the bed we had picked out together on our 3rd anniversary, were Caitlin and Jack. They were so engrossed in each other they did not notice me at first. I stood frozen, unable to move or speak, as the reality of what I was witnessing sank in. It was only when I involuntarily made a sound, something between a gasp and a groan, that they became aware of my presence. The look of shock and horror on their faces would have been almost comical in any other context. They scrambled to cover themselves, Caitlin clutching the sheets to her chest, while Jack leapt from the bed, fumbling for his clothes. The pathetic excuses began immediately tumbling over each other in their haste to explain the unexplainable. "I can see it, your husband had a work emergency," Caitlin said desperately. "This is not what it looks like," Jack added, though it was exactly what it looked like. What surprises me most when I think back to that moment is how calm I remained on the outside. Inside, I was collapsing, my entire world crumbling into dust. But externally, I simply stared at them both with cold detachment. Without saying a word, I turned and walked out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the house. I got into my car, drove to the nearest hotel, and checked in for the night, my movements mechanical and numb. That night was the longest of my life. Sleep was impossible, as my mind replayed what I had seen over and over again. Around 3 in the morning, I realized I needed to know the extent of their betrayal. I logged into our shared cell phone account and checked Caitlin's message history with Jack. What I found was devastating: hundreds of texts stretching back nearly 2 years, filled with intimate details of their affair and plans to meet. The affair had started 6 months after Jack became Caitlin's personal trainer. What began as innocent flirtation during their sessions quickly evolved into something more serious. They had been meeting at his apartment in hotel rooms, and most painfully in our home when they knew I would be working late or traveling. Our bed was not the only place they had defiled. They had been intimate in our shower, on our couch, even on the dining table where we had hosted countless dinner parties with friends. By morning, I had pieced together a timeline of their betrayal, and the depth of their deception made me physically ill. I returned home to confront Caitlin, finding her red-eyed and anxious in the kitchen. When I presented her with the evidence from the text messages, she broke down completely sobbing as she confessed to the affair. It did not mean anything, it was just physical, she claimed between tears. I still love you, I made a terrible mistake. She begged for forgiveness, promised to end all contact with Jack, and suggested counseling to rebuild our marriage. She swore it would never happen again, that she had realized how much she stood to lose. I listened to her pleas with the same detached calm I had maintained since discovering them together. When she finished, I simply nodded and said I needed time to think. What she did not know was that my apparent acceptance of her apology was merely the first move in a carefully calculated response. I had no intention of forgiveness or reconciliation. I just needed time to gather more information and plan my next steps. Over the next few weeks, I maintained the pretense of working through our issues while secretly hiring a private investigator to document their ongoing relationship. Despite Caitlin's tearful promises, she resumed contact with Jack within days, meeting him at his apartment while telling me she was working late or having dinner with friends. The investigator provided me with photos, videos, and detailed reports of their continued affair, proving that her remorse had been nothing but an act. Even more disturbing were the conversations the investigator managed to capture between them. They discussed their future together, how they would wait for the right time to tell me the truth after Caitlin had, as they put it, handled me properly. There were mentions of extravagant gifts Jack had bought her, using money from our joint accounts, weekend getaways disguised as work trips and plans for more. The financial aspect of their betrayal became clear when I began examining our accounts more closely. Caitlin had been systematically siphoning money from our joint savings, small amounts at first, that gradually increased as the affair progressed. She had opened credit cards in my name without my knowledge, racking up thousands in debt on luxury items and experiences with Jack. There were secret accounts I knew nothing about funded with what should have been our shared resources, money we had been saving for our future family. The final straw came one evening when I pretended to leave for a business dinner, but instead installed recording devices in our home before departing. When I reviewed the recordings the next day, I heard Caitlin and Jack in our living room, laughing about how trusting and naive I was. They mocked my appearance, my devotion to work, even intimate details of our marriage that should have remained private between a husband and wife. They joked about how they would spend my money once they were together, officially planning vacations and purchases with funds I had earned through years of hard work. As I listened to the woman I loved and the friend I had trusted ridicule everything about me, something hardened inside my chest. The last lingering hope that there might be some explanation, some way to salvage any part of my marriage, evaporated completely. In its place grew a cold, determined resolve. They had taken my trust, my love, and my dignity. I would not allow them to take anything more from me, especially not my future. With the full extent of the betrayal now clear, I entered what I can only describe as a state of hyper-focused clarity. Rather than confronting them with anger or engaging in destructive behavior, I channeled all my energy into a methodical plan that would allow me to exit the marriage on my terms while ensuring appropriate consequences for their Sealang's actions. My first step was consulting with divorce attorneys, scheduling meetings with 3 different law firms to find the right representation. I was careful to conduct these meetings during my lunch breaks or under the guise of work commitments, ensuring Caitlin remained unaware. The attorney I ultimately retained, Martin, specialized in high-asset divorces and cases involving infidelity and financial impropriety. When I presented him with the evidence I had gathered, he assured me we had a strong case. Together with Martin, I began compiling a comprehensive file of evidence, including the private investigator's reports, photographs, recorded conversations, and detailed financial records showing Caitlin's misappropriation of our Ford-of-Land shared assets. Every document was meticulously organized and authenticated, creating an undeniable record of both the emotional and financial betrayal. The financial chess game began in earnest once the documentation was secure. Under Martin's guidance, I opened new bank accounts in my name, only at a different financial institution. I then began the careful process of separating and securing my assets, taking only what was legally mine, while leaving Caitlin's portion untouched. I paid off and canceled our joint credit cards, closed shared investment accounts after equitably dividing them, and tracked every transaction meticulously to ensure everything was above board and legally defensible. I knew that Caitlin would likely attempt to portray me as financially controlling or abusive when the divorce became public, so I was careful to document that I was leaving her with her fair share of our marital assets. I was not interested in taking anything that was rightfully hers. I simply wanted to protect what was mine. Protecting my professional reputation was equally important. I scheduled a confidential meeting with my company's HR department and my direct supervisor, providing a sanitized version of the situation. I explained that I was going through a divorce and might need temporary flexibility in my schedule for legal meetings. I also requested a temporary transfer to our company's office in another city, citing the need for a fresh environment during the transition. My company, valuing my contributions over the years, readily agreed to accommodate these requests. With the legal and financial preparations in place, I waited for the perfect opportunity to execute what I had begun calling the ghost protocol. That chance came when Caitlin announced she would be spending a weekend away with girlfriends for a bachelorette party. Through the private investigator, I confirmed what I already suspected. She was actually planning a weekend getaway with Jack at a luxury resort a few hours away. The moment Caitlin left on Friday afternoon, my plan went into action. I had arranged for a small team of trusted friends and professional movers to help me execute the move within a single day. We worked efficiently, packing and removing only what was legally mine, items I had brought into the marriage or purchased with my separate funds. For shared possessions, I took only my fair half, documented with video recordings to prevent any later accusations of theft. I was careful to leave Caitlin's belongings untouched, even creating an inventory of what remained in the house to forestall any claims that I had taken her property. By evening, my personal items had been moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city, one Caitlin knew nothing about. The movers departed, and I took one last walk through what had been our home for the past 5 years. The house now looked strangely hollow, with gaps on bookshelves and walls where my possessions had been, yet still functional and livable for Caitlin. I left my house key and wedding ring on the kitchen counter, along with a note simply stating that I knew about the affair and would be filing for divorce. The digital disappearance came next. I changed all my passwords, removing Caitlin's access to any of my accounts. I temporarily deactivated my social media profiles to prevent her from tracking my activities or contacting me through those channels. I set up mail forwarding to a post office box, changed my email addresses, and got a new phone number that I shared only with my attorney, my employer, and a few trusted friends who were helping me through this transition. While Caitlin was still enjoying her weekend with Jack, blissfully unaware that her double life was about to collapse, Martin arranged for the divorce papers to be delivered to her at the restaurant where she and Jack would be having dinner on Saturday night. The filing included all the evidence of the affair and financial fraud, along with terms that offered her exactly what she was legally entitled to, nothing more and nothing less. I can only imagine the panic that must have set in when Caitlin received those papers in such a public setting, with Jack by her side, suddenly facing the consequences of their actions together. According to the server who delivered the papers, her face drained of color as she realized the strength of my legal position and the thorough documentation of their betrayal. The social fallout began almost immediately. I had prepared a simple factual email that I sent to our closest friends and family members, explaining that I was divorcing Caitlin due to her long-term affair with Jack and her financial dishonesty. I was careful not to be vindictive in my explanation, including only the facts necessary to explain my sudden disappearance from their lives. I did not need to embellish or exaggerate. The truth was damning enough. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Friends and family who had known us as a couple were shocked, but ultimately stood by me. Some mutual friends attempted to remain neutral, but as the details of Caitlin's and Jack's behavior became known, most found it difficult to maintain relationships with them. I never asked anyone to choose sides. The natural social consequences of their actions did that work for me. The professional repercussions came next, though again I took no direct action to cause them. Caitlin's company had strict policies about personal conduct that could reflect poorly on their brand, and an affair with a client's spouse, especially one that resulted in such a public divorce filing, ran afoul of those guidelines. She was not fired outright, but was placed on probation and passed over for a promotion she had been expecting. Jack's reputation at his fitness studio suffered even more directly. As a personal trainer who had used his professional relationship to initiate an affair with a client's wife, His ethical violation was clear. Several clients terminated their contracts with him, and the studio owner, concerned about potential liability and damage to the business's reputation, significantly reduced Jack's client load and primetime slots. Throughout this period, I maintained absolute radio silence with both Caitlin and Jack. Caitlin's initial attempts to contact me were frequent and increasingly desperate, progressing from apologetic texts to angry voicemails to tearful pleas left with mutual friends. Jack tried to reach out once with a pathetic attempt at an apology, which I ignored completely. Several mutual friends attempted to mediate, suggesting meetings or conversations to find closure, but I declined all such offers. Any necessary communication went through our attorneys, only a boundary I maintained without exception. The financial reality of the situation quickly became apparent to Caitlin. Having become accustomed to our dual-income household and the lifestyle it afforded, she struggled to maintain the same standard of living on her income alone. The legal fees for her attorney were substantial, especially as her position in the divorce was considerably weaker than mine due to the overwhelming evidence. According to mutual friends, she had begun complaining about money troubles within weeks of my departure, a stark contrast to the financial security she had enjoyed throughout our marriage. I learned later that she had turned to Jack for financial support, expecting him to step in now that their relationship was in the open. But Jack, whose income as a personal trainer was significantly less than mine, and who was now dealing with his own professional fallout from the affair, was unable or unwilling to maintain the lifestyle to which Caitlin had become accustomed. The dream life they had planned together while betraying me began to crumble under the weight of reality. My ghost protocol had worked better than I could have anticipated. By removing myself completely from their lives, rather than engaging in a messy, emotional confrontation, I had denied them the opportunity to make me the villain in their narrative. They could not claim I had been abusive, controlling, or unreasonable in the divorce when I had simply disappeared, taking only what was legally mine and leaving them to face the natural consequences of their choices. The life they had imagined building on the ruins of my trust was proving to be nothing but a fantasy, while I was already building a new reality for myself, far away from their toxic influence. With the legal proceedings in motion and my disappearance complete, I followed through with the company transfer and relocated to Boston, a city I had always been interested in, but had never visited due to Caitlin's preference for warmer climates. I accepted a promotion I had previously declined to avoid uprooting our life together, embracing the new responsibilities and challenges it offered. My new apartment was smaller than our house, but felt more peaceful, a space that was entirely mine without the taint of betrayal. I furnished it simply at first, focusing on functionality rather than aesthetics. As the weeks passed, however, I began adding personal touches, artwork I had always appreciated. But Caitlin had disliked books, arranged according to my own system rather than her preferred method. Small signs that this space was a reflection of me alone. The first months were difficult, despite the empowerment that came with taking control of the situation. I experienced a profound sense of loss, not just of my marriage but of the future I had imagined and the trust I had placed in both Caitlin and Jack. There were nights when I would wake suddenly, the weight of betrayal heavy on my chest, wondering if there had been signs I had missed, or if I could have done something differently. Recognizing the need for professional support, I found a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, Dr. Landon helped me process the complex emotions I was experiencing, the anger, grief, and lingering confusion about how the two people I had trusted most could have deceived me so thoroughly. We worked through the natural tendency to blame myself, to question my judgment, and to fear trusting others in the future. Building a new life meant rediscovering who I was as an individual, rather than as half of a couple. I began exploring interests I had set aside during my marriage, joining a local hiking group, taking evening classes in photography, and volunteering at a technology mentorship program for underprivileged teens. These activities not only filled my time but connected me with new people who knew me only as I was now, not as the man whose wife had betrayed him. My family, though distant, geographically provided unwavering support throughout this transition. My parents, who had always been somewhat reserved in their opinion of Caitlin, visited my new home and helped make it feel more comfortable. My sister called regularly, offering both practical advice and emotional support without judgment. These connections reminded me that while my marriage had ended, my identity as a son, brother, and friend remained intact. 3 months after my relocation, the divorce was finalized on the terms outlined in my initial filing. Caitlin, faced with the overwhelming evidence of her infidelity and financial misconduct, had little legal ground to contest the division of assets. She received exactly what was legally hers according to our prenuptial agreement, and state law no more and no less. Her attempts to claim additional compensation for emotional distress or to characterize my disappearance as abandonment were dismissed by the court in light of the documented affair and financial fraud. Though I maintained my policy of no direct contact, mutual friends occasionally shared updates about Caitlin and Jack. Their relationship, built on the unstable foundation of deception, began to show cracks almost immediately after I left. Without the excitement of sneaking around and the financial support I had unwittingly provided, the fantasy of their perfect life together collided with reality. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I learned that Jack had been caught cheating on Caitlin with one of his new clients. A painful irony that might have given me satisfaction earlier, but now elicited only a tired acknowledgement of the pattern. Their relationship imploded spectacularly, with public arguments at local restaurants and a dramatic scene at Jack's fitness studio that resulted in both of them being asked to leave the premises. Professionally, neither had recovered from the fallout of their affair becoming public knowledge. Caitlin eventually left her marketing position for a lower-paying role at a smaller company, while Jack's client base continued to dwindle, forcing him to take a salaried position at a commercial gym rather than maintaining his independent trainer status. Their social circle had contracted significantly, with many former friends uncomfortable maintaining relationships with either of them. While I was aware of these developments, they increasingly felt like stories about strangers rather than people who had once been central to my life. My focus had shifted entirely to my own journey forward, rather than their continued struggles. That journey included unexpected professional success. My new role at the Boston office allowed me to showcase skills that had been underutilized in my previous position. I led the development of an innovative software solution that attracted significant industry attention and resulted in a substantial bonus and further advancement within the company. The work was challenging and fulfilling, providing a sense of accomplishment that boosted my confidence in all areas of life. Gradually, I began to open myself to the possibility of new relationships. I approached dating cautiously, at first transparent about my recent divorce, but careful not to burden new connections with the full weight of my experience. I discovered that I could enjoy someone's company without immediately evaluating them as a potential life partner, a freedom I had not experienced in my early dating years when I had been so focused on finding the one. Through this process of rebuilding, I came to understand several profound truths that have shaped my perspective moving forward. I learned that self-respect must always take precedence over the comfort of codependency, that standing up for yourself is not revenge but a form of necessary justice. I recognized the difference between actively punishing someone for their transgressions and simply allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their choices. Most importantly, I discovered that moving on does not require forgiveness in the conventional sense. I do not hate Caitlin and Jack, but neither have I absolved them of responsibility for the pain they caused. Instead, I have reached a place of indifference where their actions no longer have the power to disturb my peace or influence my choices. Looking back, I do not regret my marriage, despite the pain of its ending. Those 8 years were not wasted time, but a necessary chapter in my story, teaching me lessons about myself, about relationships, and about resilience that I might never have learned otherwise. I am grateful for the strength I discovered in myself when faced with betrayal, for the true friends who stood by me during the darkest moments, and for the new beginning that emerged from what initially seemed like an ending. Today, I am the author of my own next chapter, writing it with the wisdom gained from experience and the freedom that comes from knowing I can survive even what once seemed unsurvivable. The best revenge I have found is not in making others suffer, but in refusing to allow their actions to determine the quality of your life moving forward. I wonder if you have ever experienced a betrayal that forced you to rebuild. How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it offers some comfort or guidance if you are traveling a similar path. Remember, the end of one story is simply the beginning of another, and you get to decide how your next chapter unfolds.